This week marks the culmination of tensions which have fueled the prevailing atmosphere of paranoia, outrage, and public spectacle for the last 8 months. Tensions now threatening to boil over in a climactic showdown between the mainstream and the marginalized. Leaders are lashing out at shadows in a desperate attempt to banish the specters which haunt the edges of the social fabric, as well as our collective nightmares. This is the third and final installment of a series of oppositions between Mars and Pluto. It represents an existential battle where reputations are on the line, authority is challenged, and personal sovereignty hangs in the balance. But in fighting for the crown, do we risk burning the kingdom to the ground in the process? This week, we are being called to decide which battles are truly worth fighting. And if we're not careful, pride may lead us into conflicts for which the cost of victory is alienation. Well, hello there. I'm Kyle Pierce. This is the forecast for the week of April 21st through April 27th, 2025. And as usual, we are going to go over the main astrological influences for the week ahead, the good, the bad, how they're likely to show up in the world around you, as well as how they may influence you on a more personal level. And then we are going to walk through the week day by day using the planetary days as our guide. Now, really the main event this week is this building opposition between Mars, early in the sign of Leo, and Pluto in Aquarius. This is the third and final opposition of 3 oppositions which have taken place between Mars and Pluto since early November, and have really been a key element surrounding this Mars retrograde period that we've been in. Really starting in early October when Mars first entered its shadow at 17 degrees of Cancer, and while Mars is direct currently, we're still in those shadow degrees. We really encountered the first of these oppositions between Mars and Pluto at the beginning of November when Mars was just at the end of Cancer and while Pluto was still in Capricorn, just before it ingressed into Aquarius. The second opposition took place while Mars was retrograde at the very beginning of Leo, just as it was making its way back towards Cancer. So in astrological terms, these Mars-Pluto oppositions have been pretty nasty. So I'm not exactly geeked about the one that's going to be culminating this week, especially as it's emphasized by the Sun's entrance into Taurus over the weekend, which served as the head of a T-square aspect pattern between Mars, Pluto, and the Sun, which, if you're not familiar, a T-square is when 2 planets are in opposition and both square to another planet. In this case, it's the Sun, right? And if we weren't getting enough emphasis already, very early Monday morning or late Sunday night, depending on where you are in the world, the moon ingressed into Aquarius, conjoined Pluto, and really aggravated what was already a tense aspect pattern. We have both of the lights, right, the sun and the moon, involved in this Mars-Pluto situation, which is really making it kind of at the center of everything that's going on right now. So in order to understand what this Mars-Pluto opposition is about, let's zero in on what these 2 bodies speak to individually. With Mars, we're dealing with a planet which signifies war, right? Mars is the god of war. It's conflict, it's aggression. Its nature is to overcome resistance. Mars is the planet of action, impulse, conflict, aggression, assertion. We're dealing with a game that is zero-sum in nature. The things that Mars speaks to are situations which there is a winner and a loser. Somebody who gains something at the expense of the other. So in Leo, this is the sign ruled by the sun. It speaks to leaders, to visibility, to power which emanates from the center. So Mars in Leo is going to bring conflict and disputes around leadership, around the most visible spaces in society, as well as the central positions from which power emanates. You can imagine if you're the CEO of a candy company, right? You're Willy Wonka. And as Willy Wonka, you're the public face of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory or his candy company. And as the leader, as Willy Wonka, your leadership determines to a large degree what gets made or the overall direction of the company. Not going to necessarily be running the machines, adding all the ingredients himself, mixing it up, packaging it. He's making decisions. So if you were Willy Wonka in this situation, Mars and Leo comes in to attack your position as the best chocolatier on the planet. Maybe Mars and Leo shows up and says, not only is my chocolate better than yours, but look what I found inside one of his chocolate bars. It's a tooth. It's a human ear inside this chocolate bar. And everybody says, oh my God, disgusting. And whether or not this is a true claim, the sight of the human ear inside the chocolate bar is going to change or challenge your reputation as the best chocolatier on the planet, and may have an impact which cascades down into the deeper mechanisms of your chocolate company. The Oompa Loompas might get demoralized. People might not buy your chocolate as much. So suffice it to say, these are the kinds of attacks that Mars is making. Visible ones. Ones on reputation. Ones on leadership and competition over attention, right? Over visible space. A big part of what corporations or really anybody with something to sell, they are competing over that finite amount of attention. Time spent giving attention to something or someone. And one of the ways that we get attention is by saying that there is something urgent, right? This is what Mars speaks to. Mars speaks to urgent matters that need immediate attention, or else something terrible is going to happen. Or at least when we're dealing with the influence of Pluto, we go from the fire alarm going off and everybody needing to leave the building to profound and imminent existential threat. If you do not pay attention to this, everybody will die. This is maybe where we need to address Pluto a little bit more in detail. Pluto is newer to the scene when it comes to astrology. We only discovered it about a century ago. And even in recent decades, it's been demoted. It's not even considered a real planet anymore. Nonetheless, its influence is still felt. And that tells you something about the nature of Pluto. Pluto is, in truth, remote, tiny, on the far invisible fringe of the solar system. Its tangible impact on the solar system at large is not very significant, right? Its gravitational pull is almost non-existent in solar system terms, but it wields a lot of power in our imaginations. In the simple awareness of its existence, that we know that there's some place so tiny, so remote, so dark, so icy, that it fascinates us or draws our attention simply because it's so extreme. So much of what Pluto tends to describe is less about physical, tangible things that are rooted in what you can see or taste or touch, but in our minds. Pluto is the funny look somebody gave you that you interpreted as hostile or as love and attraction or as whatever. And while in reality it may have been just a fleeting glance, maybe, I don't know, they just had something in their eye and they were squinting, or they were just mad at you at that moment. What Pluto does is takes that moment and blows it up, makes it feel like it's way more than it actually is. Maybe makes it so that now we're terrified of that guy and we feel like we need to do something extreme in order to remove the threat. So often what starts with Pluto as something very small, something that isn't that significant, gets blown out of proportion and snowballs. It turns into something huge that does have physical, tangible results that you can see in real life. Now, after Willy Wonka and Slugworth made a claim about human ears in your chocolate bars, which is maybe a little more Plutonian than just Mars and Leo by itself, but now, it's on, right? Willy Wonka feels an existential threat to his representation in the marketplace. He needs to come back with something even more extreme, even more devastating to Slugworth's reputation than that, to replace the narrative with how fucked up Slugworth's relationship with his kids are. He harvests their organs and makes his chocolate bars out of them, right? And now, Slugworth feels existentially threatened, right? This is the kind of extreme conflict that we are going to see on some level in the world. It doesn't mean that it has to play out like that. For you, it may not even come up on your radar in terms of your immediate life. If you pay attention to what happens in the world, that's the kind of thing that we might see. We might see ultimatums, threats of total annihilation, which may not actually be backed by actual action. Because to a large degree, what we're more interested in damaging with Mars and Leo is the visible face of our opponent, how it's perceived by the world. And if we can erase that, right, or we can damage that enough, the tangible material support behind that leadership starts to fall apart. Now, as I mentioned last week, we're also dealing with, on a broad level, a threat of representation, status within society at large. Mars and Leo wants to say, hey, everybody, I fucking matter. I'm hot shit. And often with outer planets, it has more of a collective bent, right? They move so slow. They speak to generational themes. So maybe what we've seen over the last several months is this kind of manifestation of a collective sense of threat to, certain groups' representation within society at large by Aquarian elements, by elements which are from the outside, which are from the fringe. And maybe with Pluto, the so far remote fringe that they're not even real, or that they're exaggerated or blown out of proportion. So we might see extreme measures to go after a threat from a fringe element, attacking groups that are marginalized, or assigning greater power to marginalized groups than they actually have in order to make them a large enough threat to justify extreme measures. I think it's fair to say that we've all seen some of this playing out in the world at large, but we're seeing around this Mars-Pluto opposition is the culmination of some element of that story or ongoing theme. The thing is that the guy that gave you a weird look at the office, if you start fucking with him, if you start telling other people in the office that he picks his nose and feeds it to his nephew, right, that's going to make that guy feel threatened and feel like he needs to lash out in equal measure. Folks, it's not fun stuff, right? Sorry. I know a lot of people come to astrology to look for comfort, right? And you don't always want to hear that nasty shit is happening in the world. And while it may feel better to pretend like it's not, or pretend like it means something good by operating under false presumptions, we risk going out in a blizzard wearing swimming trunks and a tank top. And what I hope to provide you with astrology is awareness that there's a blizzard outside and you probably shouldn't wear swim trunks and a tank top, but also B, what can you do with a blizzard, right? There may be something productive we can do with that blizzard once we understand what it is and we're not treating it like it's something that it's not. So that tangent out of the way, we can talk about the other sort of main event this week, and that is Venus's conjunction with Saturn, which has been ongoing, which was relevant last week if you tuned in then, and will continue to be relevant even after that aspect goes exact, but it's completing and tapering off this week. So much what we're doing with this Venus-Saturn conjunction is trying to make peace with a difficult situation. Perhaps we're grieving the loss of something and trying to find gratitude for its role within our lives, even if it's not what we hoped it would be, or even if it's not physically part of our lives anymore. It's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. It's a cliche, but it's true, and something to maybe meditate on during this ongoing Venus-Saturn conjunction. Also maybe taking something that we were passionate about more seriously now, or maybe trying to join passion together with discipline to create something beautiful or rewarding, or that can become a source of continued joy in the future, even if it comes with hard work or stress or pain or sadness. So there's, I think, a really good opportunity to make peace with regrets that we have, or forgive ourselves or others for not meeting our expectations or being everything that we wanted them to be or wanted ourselves to be. And by identifying where we actually are, looking at it with compassion, we can do the actual work of moving forward, of getting a little bit better one day at a time, instead of dragging ourselves down by building a prison for ourselves out of our disappointments. So with that, let's finally get into the rest of the week, starting with Monday. All right, so on Monday, we're potentially trying to get some emotional distance after dealing with some unsettling news, or perhaps after a fight of some kind. Maybe we're trying to get our Leo bod in shape, right? We're trying to fight on behalf of our personal image and implement a new workout routine. Maybe we pushed ourselves a little too far and we're feeling it physically or emotionally, or perhaps we put our name in the hat for a job promotion. We asserted ourselves into a space of visibility and we weren't picked, or maybe we were, and now we're coming to terms with what that new position, that place of increased visibility, what inhabiting that space might entail. We're dealing with the moon in Aquarius today, as it's separating from the conjunction with Pluto, the opposition with Mars, trying to get away from its participation in that big T-square between Mars, Pluto, and the Sun, and feeling a little frazzled, a little tense. We're coming off the tense situation. And what the moon in Aquarius can be good for is gaining a certain amount of emotional distance on something, or maybe giving us some support in looking at our feelings or the state of our bodies or the state of our lives in general from a bit of a more of a cool, detached, intellectual space. The moon in Aquarius isn't particularly good at a lot of specifically lunar things like emotional availability or expressing feelings, but it can be good at intellectualizing them. It can also be half the problem, right? We can gain perspective on our emotions through an intellectual framework, but we don't want to use that as an excuse to not actually engage with them on a felt level. The moon will encounter a sextile with Mercury in Aries earlier on, which generally could be very good for communication or taking in new data and actually memorizing it, because the moon is the memory, right? It's the actual physical part of your brain. It's the mechanism that holds and retains. And moon-Mercury contacts can be very good for that. Might be good for, as maybe part of that sort of clearing out process, maybe writing out our observations of our internal state, or communicating those observations to others, or perhaps writing out a plan of action for what we're going to do given our new position, or maybe given our sense of alienation, maybe not being quite where we want to be, feeling like we're not being represented, or we're not finding ourselves not having a seat at the big boy table or the center table where all the decisions are made. The moon will complete a trine with Jupiter on Tuesday. We're moving away from tense, challenging, stressful towards easier, more flowing, stable, but the energy at play is more intellectual in nature. So we're going to be trying to look at our situation, identify our own perspective within it, but also see other perspectives that are maybe outside of our own, and try to develop a picture of the situation with a more multi-perspective map. We are now also in the fourth quarter phase of the moon. This is the part of the lunar cycle where the moon is becoming darker, but it's also now more dark than it is light. There's more of the moon that we can't see than we can. So we're doing maybe a bit of an after-action report. We're clearing things out, or making space for things which will be part of our plans in the future. Now, also on Monday, Sun in Taurus will perfect the square with Mars and Leo, which has been a theme over the weekend and will continue to be a theme, but it will start to dissipate throughout the week. So one of the things we want to watch out for, as mentioned last week if you tuned in, is that with the Sun in Taurus squaring Mars and Leo, we might be feeling pressure to make things look like they're done, or pressure to deviate from a more stable, consistent way of doing things and take shortcuts in order to achieve results faster. Our boss is breathing down our necks, and we really need to get these reports out by the end of the day. So we might be tempted to maybe only do the first couple pages, the ones that we know that our boss is going to look at, and maybe do a half-assed job with the rest of it, hoping that the boss isn't going to see. And maybe he won't, but you will also have sloppy results that may bite you in the ass later on down the line. You also could burn yourself out on Monday trying to get everything done, but you might be feeling lethargic on Tuesday or Wednesday, and your work might suffer as a result. So bear that in mind if you're feeling pressure to move faster than you know is proper to do. You may have to assert your right to maintain the slower pace, maintain the steady pace, even if it takes longer in order to make sure that the job gets done right. Or if it's something that the stakes aren't that high or doesn't actually have to get done today, you just want the satisfaction of knowing that the work is done, or that you can see the result and say, look what I did. I'm so fucking badass. If you don't need to rush it out, don't. Now, as we move into Tuesday, we're again focusing a bit on this competition for visible space or for representation. Maybe we're having dinner with a group of friends and one of your friends is talking more than usual, or you're feeling like you're being edged out of the conversation or not getting heard or seen or being respected, right? You might feel disrespected and feel a need to lash out as a result. And it may well be necessary to assert yourself and make sure that you are getting the respect that you're due. But you want to, again, be aware that the influence of Pluto, right? You might be blowing things out of proportion. You might be making more out of it than is really true or really relevant to you. So often when we're in the middle of really tense stuff like this, I prefer to sit on it a little bit. If it doesn't have to be dealt with immediately, it is often better to let things gel a little bit and possibly deal with it when we're in a less emotional space about it, or we're feeling less wounded or less under attack. So you really don't want to fall into the trap of overreacting. Now, if you happen to be in a situation where you do need to assert a bold claim to a visible space, right? If it's appropriate and not super destructive and terrible, you might be able to use this to totally annihilate your competition. Just try to be ethical about it. I don't want to encourage anyone to do anything that would be truly harmful to anyone else. But this Mars-Pluto thing, it speaks in the language of ultimatums and can result in either one side backing down and retreating and creating space for you to totally occupy, or it can escalate things further into a knockdown, drag out, bare knuckle brawl. So just be aware of that. Especially as we move into Wednesday, where we have Mercury in Aries in a sign ruled by Mars. So it's speaking on behalf of the Mars and Leo situation. So you may receive or find yourself participating in a very enthusiastic communication of some kind, or making bold declarations, or perhaps finding yourself in a position to make a case for your own skill set or your own capacity to accomplish things. You really want to make sure that you're rooting your boasts in a realistic assessment of what you are actually capable of, because we might feel more energized and capable than we are actually able to be on a consistent basis, or we may be trying to make up for an internal sense of a lack of capacity. We may be needing to talk up our accomplishments, fill the space of disempowerment. Aries can be very domineering. It can be very rough and not especially tactful. We may offend people, but Aries is also a very enthusiastic space, where as much of what we're trying to do in Aries is about the display, is about the show of force. We want to put it all out on the line. We want to front load our capacity and what we're capable of. Sometimes to create an expectation in others, if we're trying to intimidate someone, we want to show them the big guns, right? We want to show them that if we want to, we can crush their skull, right? And maybe we can, maybe we can't. But if we can convince the other person that we can, we may not have to. And sometimes in Aries, we're trying to push ourselves into stressful or high stake situations in order to bring out latent capabilities within us, in order to see what we're made of, even if we don't actually know that it's there, but we maybe sense that it could be. And there's a lot of capacity there could be opportunity to talk yourself into a situation where you have to back it up with action later on. And for some people, that's a really good way of going about things, that actually they need the pressure or the resistance to overcome in order to bring out that capacity within themselves. But for others, we can be a little bit, I'll talk, game, or we don't do well in those kind of high stakes pressure situations. So if you're one of those, I would be careful. I would also be mindful of the communications you're receiving, because person on the other end may or may not be able to back that up with action, or maybe doing any number of the things that we already discussed. Moving on to Thursday, we have Jupiter in Gemini. Still, it's been in Gemini for a long time now, but Jupiter is finally doing something a little different. It's actually moving into the third decan of Gemini, which is still Gemini, right? But it represents a different phase of the process of Gemini, where we're exploring variety, we're comparing and contrasting things, we're holding things next to an opposite in order to clarify or define that thing. And we're combining different ideas in order to create new ones. We're engaged in a proliferation of whatever it is we're doing in Gemini. And while in the second decan of Gemini, we're exploring ways that we can hold opposing positions or opposing concepts, we're keeping our options open. Maybe able to wear one hat when it serves us and wear a different one when it doesn't. But in the third decan, we're being asked to choose, right? We're maybe being put into a situation where we can't be both a construction worker and a day trader. We have to choose between the two because they're existing at odds with each other. Maybe you're fucking up your trades because you're not able to keep an eye on them while you're doing your day job as a construction worker. So you either maybe let that thing go or scale back its place in your life. With Jupiter, it can present some challenges in that arena because Jupiter is about keeping everybody together, keeping everything on board to serve the greater good. It wants to achieve unity. But in the third decan of Gemini, we're often being pushed into situations where unity can't be maintained anymore. This is a theme that comes up with all the third decans of mutable signs because we're coming towards the end of a season and the beginning of a new one. There's a sacrificial or almost apocalyptic quality that can show up. And often with Gemini 3, you'll see it a lot in event charts or in the charts of people who find themselves in the center of consequential events. There's a quality of being the first domino that gets knocked over that leads to another and creates a chain reaction of events that can expand beyond the initial moment. We'll often see Gemini 3 at moments in history that we tend to mark as the point of no return or the moment of instigation for a larger chain of events. Some of what we might see in the world is potentially more events which, in retrospect, result in much larger, unforeseen set of circumstances. That can be positive, that can be negative, it can be a little bit of both. But there is a sort of seriousness that sets in when we get to this part of Gemini. It's a little less fun. We're a little less in the space of engaging in novelty or curiosity, experimenting. We may start to encounter situations where we don't get to keep things open-ended anymore. We have to choose with the data we have available. Maybe have a little bit of faith that it's going to work out the way we hope it will. Thursday is where we get the exact conjunction between Venus and Saturn, which is more a culmination of that influence than it is maybe speaking to a specific situation. But Jupiter is providing the landscape of Pisces. It's influencing what's happening there, and to a large degree, what we are making peace with or committing to are the results of what perhaps we had speculated on for a long time. We thought it could go this way, we thought it could go that way, but it actually went this way. And Jupiter, to some degree, is catching up to the game of results, of shitting or getting off the pot. And so this is emphasized on Friday when we're focused on Venus, where we're starting to separate from that conjunction with Saturn. And it's clear that we have to be a little more decisive, that we have to let go of some possibilities in order to move forward. While we may be getting clear on the outcome of one situation and coming to terms with it, we may still run the risk of deciding to move forward by chasing another rainbow, right? Which can be cool. It's good to have rainbows to chase, have ideal visions of something that we feel passionate about, that move us forward, that light us up and make it feel worthwhile to take action on something. But on Friday, we want to be as realistic as we can be about the choices we make or the outcomes we're expecting, because the choices that we make, if they're based on an too unrealistic of a expectation, we may find it really hard to get our footing, even if we need some of that rainbow fuel to get going. Try to taste the rainbow one Skittle at a time. Don't just shove it all on your. The North Node's influence can make us very hungry for that particular rainbow, and we may sabotage our efforts early on if we chase it too greedily. And we get a little bit of a continuation of this theme on Saturday, where we have Saturn still conjoined with Venus, but Venus is starting to move on. So we might be able to make use of some of that taste of what could be, of a way of seeing things that emphasizes the beauty or the redeemable qualities of a person or a situation in our lives, laying the groundwork for the new dream we're trying to realize. But we gotta be a little bit sober when we're dealing with Saturn themes, and the North Node is not the soberest influence, but I think it helps a little bit that that Jupiter is in a more sober part of Gemini, that it's delivering a more sober version of things to Saturn in Pisces. We're maybe starting to cross things off of our list. And that's not really going to serve my cotton candy castle. The M&M moat might actually be too heavy for the cotton candy bed, and it might fall through, right? It may throw the whole thing on a whack, right? I accept that now. No more M&M moat for my new cotton candy castle. It's a good day to start making those assessments and crossing elements of an overbloated agenda off your list. You might be able to see that certain things of our plan, certain elements of our plan are at cross purposes to the overall agenda. Now, also on Saturday, we are getting the culmination of the Mars in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. To a large degree, it's not directly as relevant to what is going on with Saturn and the Saturn things that we're trying to do. And I don't necessarily have anything new to add here. It's just everything we've already talked about with that is peaking today. So I'd maybe stress a little more to focus on the Saturn sort of things. Stay out of the Mars-Pluto battle and just focus on building stone by stone or cotton candy ball by cotton candy ball your particular vision of the future. And then finally on Sunday, we get the new moon in Taurus, actually. And while this is still pretty closely configured to Mars, which might potentially be getting off our Taurus season projects off to an unsteady start, it does become really important to be conscious of the way you're laying the foundation or the kind of routine that you're setting yourself up for. So in Taurus, we're very much rewarded by steady, consistent effort, and paying close attention to careful planning and steady effort will yield fruitful results. But again, that's based on the plans that we lay and the proper assessment of the terrain that we're developing on. So if you oversell what the land is capable of, or take shortcuts in how you go about developing it, you're not going to get the best results. So while there is great opportunity to sow the seeds to something that can be very prosperous in the long term, we just want to be very careful about how we're using our energy and making sure that the workload that we're signing ourselves up for is sustainable. And there may be pressure to overpromise or work yourself too hard in an effort to maintain a position that is subject to intense competition. And while you might be able to grow in strength through that effort and exertion, we could start building a foundation in unsustainable terrain. So if you do find yourself in a situation that sounds a bit like this, maybe you got the promotion you wanted, but the expectations are super high. The workload is intense in an effort to impress or in an effort to show how worthy we are of this new position, to set ourselves up for an unrealistic workload. It's better to be reliably underperforming or reliably in the results than to set up the expectation of something really awesome that you're not able to deliver on, or that ends up falling apart and creating a disaster in the process. Slow and steady is the name of the game. And even if we're pushing outside of our comfort zone, which is always good to do, but just don't overdo it, right? Aim for 1 or 2 levels above where you're at, then 10. And with that, I'll wrap up the horoscope for this week. You can book a reading with me at kylepierceastrology.com. I've got a fair bit of availability over the next few weeks, but starting around mid-May, I'm not going to be so available, especially during Norwalk, which is over Memorial Day weekend and throughout that week. That's a good solid week that I'm just not going to be around. I may not even be able to do a horoscope for that week. So if you're looking to get a reading in the near future, I would book that sooner rather than later. Look forward to seeing you next week.